She's an Atlanta native. She loves being with her family outdoors, time with friends, and tapping into a previously unknown creative side, crafting jewelry. She comes today not as a professional, but as a mom with real stories of God's goodness in her life. So please help me welcome Rachel.
Make sure this is on. I haven't used one of these before. Okay, great. And that was a perfect devotional to lead us off with, because I am going to talk about God's goodness today in a little bit different way. But first of all, before we get started, I want to talk about the things that I am not. I know that's not how normally people start, but I just want to have it out there. I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a parenting expert. And I've never done anything like this. So, aren't you excited? So you're probably wondering why I'm your speaker. And a couple times I've wondered the same thing. I think Melissa was very brave in asking me to do this. But what I do have is I have my own stories. We all have our own stories. So I'm here today to share some of my stories in the way that I have seen God's goodness. So when I was thinking about what I was going to speak about today, I really didn't have I didn't know. And Melissa was like, whatever you want to speak on. And I was like, okay, does she want me to speak about jewelry, fostering, my family? And she just kind of left it open-handed, which was very generous. But what I kept coming up was God's goodness. It literally just kept coming up. And y'all probably have experienced that before, where you're in a sermon, and then you head to a Bible study, and then you turn on the radio, and the same thing keeps coming up, and you're like, okay, God, I'm listening. And sometimes it does take a while for me to listen. So I decided to take a dive into that, to God's goodness. And with that, I started with Romans 8:28. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. So that was the first one that I started to read and just to pray over and think about. And the next one was Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Okay, so here's the thing. What is good? It's confusing to me. I'm pretty sure in our world, there's a list of good things. Some of those things might be success, wealth, a healthy family, well-behaved kids. I know that would be a really good thing. An adoring husband that fills up your car with gas and brings you coffee in bed. Youthful looks. I think we all probably would love some youthful looks. So yes, all those. Those all sound good, right? But as I did further research on this, I ended up reading about a man named Larry Ward, and he founded a group called Food for the Hungry. And when he founded this group, he went for a salary without 2 years. He was very devoted to this cause. And he wrote something that kind of changed the lens that I was seeing good as, and what God means in these passages. The main thing that stuck out that he said, this guy Larry Ward, is he said, being called according to God's purpose also reminds us what our good actually is. It's not our comfort or worldly success. Here's what it is. It's the furthering of his purpose through us. So it might not be what we think of as good. It might be that it's just furthering God's purpose through us, which is sometimes harder to see. It's harder to know. So that makes me think we can kind of delete that list that we had of all the things that mean good. Not that any of those are bad. You could definitely have those things. God can bless you with those things. But it's just a different lens. So when looking at good through a spiritual lens, it just changed the way I looked at my life stories. So I just wanted to show you some places that I've seen God's good and his blessings. And then there's been a time or two when I've stepped out in faith and I haven't seen the goodness. And I might not see it until I'm with Jesus. I might not know what it was or whose life had changed or how it worked. So I'm going to share 4 different large pieces of my life today. And I decided to start with my parents' story. And the reason I share their story first is because God also says that we set good for generations. And all of us are moms. And I just think it would be really cool when looking at what we're doing as good today, if we could think about, if I do good today, this might actually affect my child's life or their child's life and go on for generations. And I think a lot of times when we think of generational, like what pops into my head is generational sin. But there's actually generational goodness And I think we should dwell on that because that's pretty awesome. In Genesis 22:18 it says, "And in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed because you have obeyed my voice." So we can obey God's voice today and our kids' lives can be changed. And that actually happened with my parents. So starting with my parents' story, my parents were Sandra Wright and Charles Darwin Shannon. Yes, you heard that right. My dad's name is Charles Darwin. And he was born in like a shack. So his mom literally had never heard of evolution in Charles Darwin. So this Southern Baptist woman named her child Charles Darwin. So I feel like I always have to explain that. They're like, oh, your grandmother, she must have been really into evolution. No, never even heard of it. So that was my dad, Charles Darwin. He met my mom at an apartment complex on Buford Highway in the 60s. My mom, nothing like my dad, was a Jewish girl from Charleston. And like I said, my dad is Southern Baptist from a tiny Georgia town. Oh wait, I think I have a picture of them. Okay, that's them. My dad, tiny Georgia town, most of you have not heard from it. I should probably do it in the giveaway later because it's called Enigma, Georgia. It is a small town outside of Tifton. Tifton is the big city, so if that tells you anything. So my dad and mom met. They should have run in opposite directions, like for sure they should have. And my dad actually tried to run in the opposite direction, but my mom wouldn't have it. And as you'll see, that's a theme with the women in our lives. But he wasn't ready to settle down. He wanted lots of girlfriends, not ready to settle down, but as luck would have it, he ended up in a terrible motorcycle accident right by Zoo Atlanta. He almost died. He was put in a room at the hospital that had an exit to the morgue. He was in there for 6 months and he lost part of his leg. He crushed his whole body, crushed his intestines. A car just completely hit him. And he was left unemployed and with much less dating options. But my mom kept coming. She just kept coming. And so that's when my mom got her way. She had a handicapped, unemployed, non-Jewish man all to herself. And she was thrilled. I don't know why. But as you can imagine, her parents were not thrilled. They were not thrilled. I don't even know if they cared about the handicapped, non-employed part, but he was Jewish. He was not Jewish. So they did not even let my dad into their house when they drove to Charleston to meet them. Once my parents said they were going to get married, my great uncle, my grandfather, all these men flew to Atlanta to talk my mom out of it, which I'm sure just drove her even closer to the aisle, where she eloped in a lime green polyester dress and married my dad. But God had really big plans for them. And it was not easy. Because remember, my mom was Jewish. She was not a Christian. And it gave them lots of marriage problems. And I remember as a kid, lots and lots of fighting. I have 2 older brothers. They're 5 and 9 years older than me. And I remember us just listening to the fighting. And they did not like each other. They wanted a divorce, but they both wanted all 3 kids. I really think that's the only reason they did not get divorced. But God had plans for them. And I will not get into this long story, but through a very random event, random series of events, they ended up at a marriage retreat at a church. They thought they were going to hear one of my dad's friends speak. They might have gotten tricked into it, I'm not sure. But it was a marriage retreat, and my mom ended up enjoying it, and they went back, and then started going to church there. And my mom ended up meeting Jesus, and she was the biggest role model in my life for Jesus. She served people through his love, and she planted a seed for generations. So, not smooth sailing, but ended up having a beautiful life and marriage for over 40 years. And I can obviously look back on that story and see God's good and purpose, even though it was difficult. And I can see how my brothers and I are blessed because my parents obeyed his voice, and our generation is affected by that. So, this leads me to my second big part of my story, where I experienced the hardest thing in my life and the best thing in the same season. It's funny how God can do that to you. So I'll never forget, in my 20s, I was single and I went to Buckhead Church, and I decided to go on a mission trip, and I went to Bolivia. And my parents just were really involved in my life, and my dad still is. And my parents picked me up from the airport from Bolivia, even though I was in my 20s, and I could just tell something was off. They were taking all my friends from the trip to lunch, but they just weren't like opening up as much, and it was just strange. So we finally got in the car, and it was just us, and my parents let me know that my mom had found out while I was gone that she had stage 4 lung cancer, and she was not even a smoker. And obviously this news was unimaginable. My mom was my best friend, And I just couldn't believe it. But the more remarkable thing is my parents sat me down that afternoon. They gave me a little bit of time. I went home with them, and they told me, Rachel, we are praying, or my dad said, Rachel, we are praying that your mom will be healed. But more than that, we are praying that you will find a husband. And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, your brothers are both married, they have children, we feel like they're taken care of, their wives love Jesus, we're not worried about them. And my mom was like, I don't want to leave this earth without knowing that you were taken care of. And I thought she was crazy. I was like, can we just focus on praying for your healing, please? But that's what they said. So, and I was very single at that time, very. So fast forward 3 weeks. Yes, 3 weeks. I had committed to going to the Buckhead Church singles retreat with my small group. And I thought that was a ridiculous idea. I did not want to go anymore. I wanted to be with my mom. I didn't want to waste any time. But my mom insisted that I go. She was like, no, you have to go. This is important. It's just weekend, you go. And you guessed it. Right there on that trip, I stalked. I met my husband. But I really did stalk him. And he was definitely the man my parents were praying for. He was probably more than they even knew to pray for, or that I did. That was God answering prayers very quickly. That was some really powerful prayers. But Nick and I started dating a few weeks later after the retreat, after I had stalked him and put myself next to him like every moment possible on the trip. And I'm lost on pictures, I don't even know. Okay, well, this is fast forwarding a little bit. I'll get there though. So, met him on the trip, y'all, on our very first date. Well, first of all, everybody I dated before him, I was like trying to save. Like, I was a spiritual leader, I was trying to save them, hoping they would get baptized, like, it was bad. Okay, with Nick, first date, he prayed for my mom. And I was just blown away. So that's how good it was. He's not perfect, but that's how good it was then. And y'all, my mom had these rules. She always had rules. One of the rules was, if you get married, you need to date a guy for a year, and then you be engaged for a year. Both my brothers followed the rules. They did the year, and then the year. They knew each other for 2 years. They knew all the seasons together, all that. Well, my mom met Nick, and the first question was, when are you gonna get married? She threw those rules right out the window. And God answered her prayers, and only 5 months after we started dating, Nick asked for permission from my parents to marry me. We set a date for 6 months out from that to plan a wedding for over 300 people. And you know what? I truly was never stressed about it. We prayed every day, and what we prayed about is that my mom would be at the wedding. That was my only concern. So all was well and exciting. We were planning, it was going great, and then a week before the wedding, my mom woke up with a terrible migraine, and my dad had to take her to the ER, and the cancer was in her brain. It was a week before the wedding. She begged the doctors, do whatever you gotta do. I don't care, just do what you have to do to get me to this wedding. So they did some form of radiation to her brain. She was in bed all week long. This is the week before my wedding. So no, we didn't even worry about final details. It was just like, how can we get her to the wedding? She had been in bed all week, and she literally got out of bed, came to my wedding, and was there till the very end. It was a huge celebration. This is Nick and I at our wedding. This is my brothers, Carrie walking my mom down the aisle. And this is my mom and dad dancing at my wedding. And that was the biggest miracle I've ever seen in my whole life so far. And it was crazy. I mean, she literally stayed till the very end when we were blowing the bubbles, and she never got out of bed again after that. And I miss her every single day. And I don't understand why she was so sick. I don't understand why she can't meet my 3 girls who she would adore and would drive her crazy and she would spoil. But she got to go to my wedding, and that was huge. And she knew and loved my husband, and I think it would be very difficult if she hadn't known him or if he hadn't known who she was. And I also have peace knowing that she's with Jesus, and I think that she probably can see the whole picture now, and she can see all the goodness. Okay, changing way gears. Lupero. So, y'all probably know, if you didn't know before you walked in, that I'm a jewelry designer, which sounds really funny to me. And I have a very small jewelry business called Lupero Designs. It's named after my 3 sometimes precious girls. Lucy, Pearl, and Rose, and they are 11, 10, and 8. And in 2018, I was a stay-at-home mom thinking about teachers' gifts, which I'm sure we all do, and I wanted to give it to everybody. I want to give a gift to like the teacher, the sub, the janitor, the lunch lady, like I want to give a gift to everybody, which is not always in the budget. So I started thinking about that, and my husband and I happened to go into Sugar Boo at the Battery, the little cute store, and we saw these leather keychains, and I was like, that's so cute, I would love to give something like that to teachers. I think I want to give all of our teachers and staff leather stamped bracelets. And then I was kind of like, I don't know why I think that, I don't know where I can get those, I definitely don't know how to make them, and my husband, who was homeschooled, was like, oh yeah, in homeschool I used to stamp leather. I'm like, of course you did. Do you remember like how popular like the belts, you wear a belt, you like stamp your name and stuff? Like, so he was like, oh yeah, and I think there's this place called Tandy Leather and you can get leather there. And I was like, okay, honey, okay. But I couldn't get it out of my mind. I kept thinking about it, like, well, what if I could stamp leather? So I kept thinking about it, and finally I looked into it and found out there was a Tandy Leather in Norcross, Georgia. And I decided to go out there one day, and I walked in and I said, I want to stamp some leather bracelets, what would I need? And they literally brought out a leather hide, like a full hide, and handed it to me with some metal stamps. And I was like, alrighty. So I went home and I just started playing, and I came up with my first thing, and it was these leather step bracelets where I would stamp kids' names or verses, and I made those for all my teachers. And then I was like, I have all this leather here, I should probably make earrings. So I started making earrings and giving those as gifts to friends. And then people started asking if they could buy them for their friends, and that's kind of just how that started. But here's the one thing that was different. When it all started, I prayed about it, and I decided that this was obviously a gift. Let me tell you why this was obviously a gift. I have never been creative in my entire life, like ever. I'm not kidding. I can't draw. I can kind of draw a stick figure, like kind of. And I've never made jewelry before. It's just not something I've ever done. I'm just not creative. In fact, I gave my best friend some jewelry that I made, and 30 minutes later, she was like, where did you get that jewelry you gave me? And I was like, I made it. And she's like, shut up. And I was like, no, I did. And she truly did not believe me. And she was like, you're not creative? And I was like, I know, I'm not creative. So because of that, I knew that it was a gift that God had given me and literally dropped into my lap. So because of that, I prayed that I would be open-handed with Luke Bro. I prayed that I would follow opportunities that God gave me, but not at the risk of my family and not at the risk of forcing anything. And y'all might think, okay, that's no big deal. Like, whatever, you've got this business, this is awesome. But sometimes it is a struggle because, when I started, there's just so many awesome creatives in Atlanta. Like, y'all know, so many awesome creatives. And I started with some of these girls around the same time, and they're just doing things differently than me. They are like maybe more successful, or they're having flashy parties and birthday parties for their companies, and are have some famous people wearing their stuff, or just different worldly success. And sometimes I have to stop because I'll get jealous, or I'll get like, maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe people don't like me. But then I have to just open my hands and say, God, this is for you. And then look, I'm here. I'm not a speaker. I'm not like I said, I'm not a Bible scholar, and here I am. I'm just another mom who is having the same experience as y'all are. So I definitely don't do it perfectly. I continually have to remind myself that God is in charge of this, but He has blessed me, and because it is so fun. It has just brought so much fun to my life and to my family. Okay, on to the most recent chapter of the Down family, our foster journey. This is my oldest, Pearl, and then Lucy in the middle, and then Rose on the end, and this is Yana and Leah with them. You might want to know a little bit about fostering. It's confusing, it's wonderful, it's very messy, it's joyful, and it's very confusing. I could go on about that forever, but just to let you know how we got into fostering, Nick and I both my husband have had fostering around us our whole lives. His parents fostered when he was a little kid. They fostered babies in Virginia. There was a cooling off period where they needed families to watch babies till the mom decided whether she was going to keep the baby or give it up for adoption. So he grew up doing that. my brothers are older than me, and when my brother's his family fostered, and then we live in Riverside, and a lot of y'all know the Englishes, and they're our dear friends, and they were fostering. And it wasn't that God necessarily called us to fostering. I didn't feel this voice to foster. But what we realized is we could do it. We had the space, we had the time, we had the resources, we had the support. So I don't know that God always has to necessarily call you into something, but if you can, we're like, well, we can do it, and God keeps showing it to us, so we decided to do it. Paperwork took forever, maybe 2 years for us, took a really long time. And when we finally agreed what we were gonna do, when we were through the process, we were like, okay, we'll take one baby, and it'll be a baby. 1 year under, only one baby. And then we got our first call. And it was for a 1.5 and 2-year-old half siblings that have celiac disease. And you guessed it, we said yes. And you know what? Taking care of the girls was the easy part. It brought so much to our family. My girls up here, they look really happy. They are wonderful children, but they are probably like a lot of yours will be when they're a little older. They cannot find their shoes. They need help with everything. They complain. They do all the normal things that kids do. But y'all, these 3 girls can bathe a baby, they can change a poopy diaper, they can put a baby to bed, they can do all of those things without complaining. Things they can't do for themselves, they did for these girls. And that brought so much joy to Nick and I to see that they could serve others like that. It also brought joy to our community because people that, not everybody can foster, but people that couldn't could come and be a part of it. But fostering has definitely become a common dish in our family. Our girls cannot wait to do it again. But y'all, this system, y'all know, you hear it over and over and over again how it's broken, but it's just, until you see it, you just can't even believe how broken it is. We did not have a social worker or an agency visit us for this first 6 months we had the girls. So they literally were dropped off with trash bags, and no one came to our house for 6 months. We were like, what are we supposed to do? And we were told we'd only probably have them for a couple months. So it was unbelievable. They didn't check in on us, they didn't help us, and we had them for a year, over a year. They became part of our family, and then they went back to their mom. Not because their mom was better or did the work or anything. It's because they looked at them as paperwork and they wanted the paperwork to be off the desk. We even had someone at DFACS tell us that she was tired of the paperwork being on her desk. And I was like, you mean the girls? Because they're people, they're babies. So how is that, how are we supposed to see God in that? How are we supposed to see that that's okay? And I don't, because I don't want to act like everything's a pretty bow, because it's not. I don't know. But I do know that Romans 8:28 is real. We know that for all those who love God, all things are working for good, for those are called according to his purpose. So I don't know what it is, and maybe it was just that my girls' lives have changed and we'll do more for other people. Maybe it was someone in our community was changed. Maybe Yana and Leah will remember the love that they had from our family down the road. But like I said, I don't want to wrap everything over the pretty bow because everything works out, because it doesn't. God does call us to good and he gives us good. But like I said, sometimes it's spiritual good and we just don't see that. But we have to stay still and listen and ask God. Ask him where the good is. Even when times are dark. With my dad's accident or my mom being sick or Yana and Leah going back home, I can still see God's gifts. But sometimes I have to slow down, which is almost impossible. I know that with these sweet, sweet babies I see. I'm sure it's almost impossible. But we have to sit down and we have to be quiet and we have to ask God to show us the goodness and ask that at least someday that we'll see it. And I really hope that each day that y'all see his goodness. And I want to leave y'all with what Larry Ward said, because I just think it's so important. You might want to write it down or I can send it out. But being called according to God's purpose also reminds us what our good actually is. It's not our comfort or worldly success. It's the furthering of his purpose through us. Okay, and I think you're going to have table time now, and then